Are you ready to turn your Notion workspace into powerful apps for your clients and customers? I'm talking about things like client portals to only share specific tasks and projects with certain clients, or members-only resource hubs, all the way to dedicated course pages where people can go through things and track their progress. And the best part, you'll keep managing all your data in Notion just like you're currently doing it now. In this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through this process of building your own custom apps on top of Notion. And while we're at it, we're going to solve one of Notion's biggest current problems: granular user permissions. Whenever we build anything in Notion, we need to always think about two things: the databases that we use to store our information and the dashboards that we're building to allow interactions with these informations. Now, the second we want to use Notion to build actual apps like small little web apps, well, there's a third dimension that we need to add to that, and that is user verification access rights, right? Who is allowed to log into our app and what kind of information are they allowed to see or access. So before you build any kind of Notion app, you need to answer basically three questions. First, what information do we need to organize? Second, what will our users be able to do? And who do we actually give access? And let's just take a quick look at three examples, right? So if we were to build a Notion client portal, well, we would want to give we want to store projects and tasks, right, that we're doing for our clients. We need clients to view their specific projects and only their projects and request new tasks. And then who gets access? Well, every new client while they're being onboarded. Or the example that we're going to build in this specific video, partner resource hub, right? It's training materials that we want to share, but could as well be if it's not a partner resource hub, right? If it's a course platform, that would be the different lessons of the course. Then every user should be able to see the materials that have been shared with them, right? Maybe they don't get access to all course materials, but just a certain subset. And then they should be able to check off lessons, right, to track their progress. And who gets access? Well, in this case, our business partners. Or completely different example, right? If we were to build a simple local forum, well, what we would want to track are conversations. We would want to allow people to read conversations and leave comments, and everyone who gets access to it as well, those will be the members of our, local group. So now that we have a rough idea of what it is that we want to build, let's start fleshing this out in Notion. So we have probably three databases that we need: training materials, topics, and partners. Training materials is the actual information that we have. Topics will be buckets to group that together. And then we have partners, which is our directory, right, with whom we want to share these things. And then we can, for every partner, select, okay, these are the topics that they should get access to. Now, how exactly this is structured, of course, depends on what sort of resource hub we would build, right? If this is, for example, for affiliates, it might depend on what affiliate level they are. If this is for a franchise system, right, it might depend on whether they are a full franchise user, right, that gets access to all our resources, or maybe they just get access to a subset, right? Maybe you franchise a bakery chain and they only get access to recipes, but not to your marketing playbook. Who knows? That's one option. But again, right, you can very easily take this same approach and use it, for example, instead for course management. And then your topics might be the different courses that you have and trainings materials and different, lessons for this training materials. Maybe you add another layer in between, right, where you have chapters and then individual lessons. That's always the same approach. So we can start with this simple layout first. So first up, trainings materials. What is it that we need here, right? Let's create a database for our trainings materials and then think about what are kind of the properties that we need for each individual lesson. Well, we probably need a text property, just a plain one, to help us write a short description. And let's give this maybe the speech bubble as an icon. We need a number, right? So we can later number, okay, what is the, lesson number for our general order. We also might want to add some tags, right, to just explain the basic topic. So let's create a multi-select property for our topics. And here, let's use the shapes maybe as our fitting icon. Perfect. Now, these are just general categorization elements, but we still need to add the materials. Now, what I generally recommend, in particular in this situation, is that, for example, if you have any files like videos or PDFs or something that you want to provide and give to people, that you don't directly upload them to Notion. Because Notion is not the best tool for file storage. So I would use a cloud storage solution, right, like Google Drive or SharePoint, and then grab the share link and then add it here to your database. And that way you get the best of both worlds. You get Notion databases to organize your knowledge, right? You don't need to set up a complicated folder structure. You can all just theory throw it in one big folder and then just use your database to organize it. And at the same time, you don't have to deal with the little annoyances that come with uploading files and downloading them from Notion. So let's do that. Let's assume we have for every training lesson, we have a URL for our video. So we go into in here, Then we're going to grab the camera icon, and then we will have also a URL property for additional files to then link to maybe the folder where it is in, or like just like a specific element like a PDF or so on Google Drive. Next up, topics. Topics can be even simpler, right? Let's create our database here. Again, new table, topics. For topics, for now, let's keep it to also a text property that will be the description of the topic. Here's our speech bubble. And then let's create our relation to our individual training materials. So let's create our relation. Say we want this related to training materials, should show on both sides. And this will be here called, oops, do we have topics already there? Let's call this tags instead. And then we can add our relation here, relation to our training materials, and then set it up as a two-way relation so we can connect it both ways. Great. So now we have this set up. We also can just like speaker add this for matching icons, and up here we can add a box. And then there's actually one last thing that I just thought of that we could add to make this a bit nicer. Maybe let's also add on training materials the duration, right? So we add another number property, duration, and then we can add on topics. We can add a simple either roll-up or formula to indicate, okay, like what is the total duration? So let's do this with the Notion formula. Total duration, edit formula, and what we will do is we'll go to training materials and then say dot map. Even if you've never written a formula, don't worry, right? Just follow along, and then it should work. Map current dot, and then we want the duration, and then we click outside of the bracket and then do sum, right? So what this does is it goes into the related entries. It takes the duration of all these related entries, and then it sums them up. If you want to learn more about Notion formulas, like a big, very long masterclass is dropping soon, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on that one. But perfect. This is now our very simple setup, and now we can fill this with some sample data and then see how it looks in our Notion backend in terms of the structure. So here's some sample data, assuming that we're building a resource hub for franchise users of my cafe Notion chain, right? It's a fictional company that runs Notion-inspired cafes all across the country. It's the most hipster, most beautifully designed cafe that you know, of course. And we have a bunch of training materials, right? From our layout to our latte art and so on and so on. And we've grouped this around our 4 core topics. So very straightforward, where I just filled out these entries, and then we related everything to the topic that it belongs to. And then on our topic view, right, we also just have name, description, and we have now the total duration. One other element that we can, of course, add there, just thought of it, is another formula where, you know, like number of resources, something like this. And in here, the formula is even easier. We go to training materials, and we say dot length, right? This just gives us the number of resources that we have in every single lesson. Perfect. All that's left now is to create our partner database. So let's go in here and say database inline. Again, new table. Let's call this our Cafe Notion partners. Here, what we want to do is we have, of course, their name. Maybe we want to have for us internally, right, like the address that we need to track. We need their email for sure. And then in order to allow us to say, okay, like what should they get access to, we need to have a relation, right? We need to have a relation from our partners to the topics, right? So we can call this maybe has access to, and then can be accessed by. Just like our internal names, that doesn't really matter for this purpose. But we can, like maybe with like a lock and key symbol to indicate that this is the things that they have. So, if we have like, ex Starbucks lover, their like email address is like hello@gsfry.de, and now we can select, like what do they have access to. Maybe this is like on our premium partners, right? So they have access to all our training materials. Can I move myself out of the way? But then we have also, coffee purist, and the only thing that they have access to is maybe our recipes, right? They don't have the full package for the franchise usage. They only get like the things that we actually produce. All right, so basic setup in terms of the backend done. Now let's start building out the actual front-end interface so that people that are not part of our Notion can use this data, log in, and do some things with it. Now at this point in our project, we need some help to turn Notion into a proper web app, because in Notion alone, we can't yet do this, right? As you know, if you followed my channel for a while, Notion doesn't have row-level permissions yet, which means we can't just say, okay, if I build now a dashboard for the coffee purists, please share only the topics with them that they are assigned to, and then do the same for Starbucks lover, please share only the ones that are assigned to them. If you try to do this, you will notice that there's no secure way to do this, right? You need to give access to the whole underlying database, and there's no way to fully securely lock this view. So what we need to do is we need to use Notion as the backend for our app, and then use a different application to build our frontend, right? Just like in web development, we have then two separate services. The backend, where we organize our data in Notion, and the frontend that our users use to interact. Now, the advantage of doing it this way is also that you can still manage all your workflows in Notion, right? We only need to set up our frontend once, and then whenever we make any changes, we make it only in Notion so we can integrate it with the rest of our business. The frontend that we're going to use for this purpose is called Softr, which is an amazing no-code builder. Just a few months ago, they released the Notion integration, finally, for which I was so excited because it's also currently the best way to build client portals in Notion. So if you're wondering how to build client portals in Notion, I've linked that video down below in the description. The process is similar to the one here for the resource hub, but for the sake of this one, we're going to focus on this use case where we build this like resource franchise system here. But if you're curious for projects and tasks, check out this one. So what do we need to do? We need to go to Softr, link in the description, sign up for account, and then when we log in, this is what we'll see, right? For you, it's probably empty because you don't have an app yet, but this is where we can start creating the front end for our Notion app. To do so, let's start from scratch. This is our option, and then we can say that we want to connect it to Notion, although at this point we can also actually connect it later, doesn't really matter. Let's click on connect later and figure it out in a second. We get set up with our very basic app, and just let's look quickly at the UI for Softr. We have here on the side some basic general navigation right between the pages for our little web app, the theme, the users, and the settings. We have then in the middle, this is the actual, drag and drop interface where we build the front end. Very, very simple. And on the right, we have some context menu where we can do some other things. And basically what we're now going to do is we're going to design a front end as if we were a web designer with a few drag and drop blocks. And then we can use our Notion data to populate the views there, right? So we can pull dynamically the data from Notion, display it here, and Softr will handle all the user verification and all the rest for us. Let's start by giving this a name, right? So this will be our Cafe Notion franchise knowledge hub. Perfect. And then we can leave this here up for now, right? We don't want to focus on this. We're going to focus on the list view down below. List views are the main way of how we're going to get our Notion data into Softr. And you can think of them as filtered views of your Notion database, just that they appear here in Softr instead of in Notion. So we're actually going to delete this one, right? So we're going to select it, and then we click on this little delete icon to remove it so that we start from scratch, and we can add our own one. Now you see below this like top block for my web app, I can click here to add a block, and now in the dynamic ones, right? These are the different ones that we can add here. And we actually, let's open the list one, right? And we have all the options, and now we can choose, okay, how do we want our different categories displayed, right? Because probably on our main page, we don't want to have all the different knowledge articles displayed. Instead, we want to just show them, okay, these are the different buckets that they can choose from. And Softr just had a big redesign. So now we have blocks that look a lot more modern. Really love the new touches that they have here. So that's what we're going to use here. We're going to use the newly redesigned list block. Just click on it and we're adding it to our page. Now in Softr, we'll always have our selections here on the side, right? So we have the list block selected, and now I can say here, do I want to actually display this as this list, one thing above the other, or do I prefer horizontal cards? And I think for like a few selection of categories, right, I prefer this horizontal card one. So I want to switch to this, right? Yes, let's reset some of the options. That is fine with me. And now we see it laid out differently. So time to add a data source, right? Here under data source, this is where I can now define, well, what is the Notion database where I actually want to pull this from? So I'm going to click on here, and you see I have already my Notion connected. If you don't have your Notion connected, you're going to click on add another data source. You're going to pick Notion, and you're going to go through the OAuth workflow. Then you need to make sure after you've done this that the element or the page where all your information in Notion is stored is shared with Softr. So I can check whether this is the case on me, right? So on my page, I can click on the three dots here, scroll down to connections, and I should see Softr. Yeah, Softr is connected. Perfect. And that's why when I go down here, right, and I select my Notion account, I'm able to pick from the databases in the system, right? So one of them, what was it? We had the topics, right? That was our element. Let's search for topics. We have too many in here. Perfect. Topics. That's what I want to connect. And then in a moment, rather than having the placeholder data, we have now our data from Notion in here. So far, however, the only indicator that this comes from Notion is that we have 4 elements here, right? And we have 4 elements in Notion. It currently still has placeholder information everywhere. So let's go to content here in the other tab, and let's map our information from the Notion properties to the actual display properties here. So what we want to do is we want to make sure first the heading matches our topic, right? So we click on heading here on the side, and now I'm going to select that I want this to map this to the name of my Notion database. And you see logistics, customer service, perfectly, that already updates. Second, this text property below, I want to map that to the description that I have, right? So I'm going to click in here and say, please map this to the description. And now we see, okay, Cafe Notion, recipes and drinks, our signature drinks and recipes, how to keep the machine running, and so on and so on, right? This is our live data from Notion. If anything in Notion changes, it changes here on the front end as well. Now we see that we have also 2 more options. We have the cover media, right? And we have the cover media tags listing at the top. Now we don't have tags on our categories, right? But we have the number of things that are behind it. So I can click in there and say, well, let's actually map this to the number of resources. And I get the little numbers here. Or if I would like, also to tell the user what this is about, right? Then I could go into Notion and I could actually add a new formula property, right? I could call this display resources on Softr, and I could say, please here give me as text, number of resources :space plus the number, right? And then we have like a little bit more information, and now we could go back to Softr and say, actually, instead of mapping to just a number, let's map to this so that it also shows the number of resources there. In order to do so, whenever you change anything in Notion, you need to make sure that you pull that information into Softr, right? Because currently it doesn't know that we have actually this new property. So let's go to source. Let's quickly wait for this to load, and then we can say, please refresh the connection once. And once we've done that, we now will be able to see that. Right, so now I click the number of resources, and now we will have also display resources on Softr. And then I get this little number of resources, 3, 4, and so on, tooltip at the top of my card. I'm going to skip over the images for now, right? We could map that as well, but we'll do that later when we do the design. So for now, let's just make sure we clean up the rest. Softr, since we have database here, right, gives us any option to search through entries and to filter them. But since we have only a few categories, I don't want it here, right? I don't want the search bar, so I'm going to turn this off. And I don't want the filter here, so I'm going to remove the filters too. To do so, I'm going to click into a filter option, right, on the 3 dots and then on delete. And once they're all gone, they will disappear here. And now I have just my categories here on the main page below my upper info elements. It is already looking quite nice. So one thing I want to add though first is I want to now also just add a title and subtitle to this section, right? I want to make sure that they know, okay, so let's see, browse our resources, and we can call this, we're here to help you make the most out of your franchise with Cafe Notion. Just giving them some context, and if we wanted to, we could then also see how we want to display this. Should this be centered? Should this be on the side? But I think this looks pretty good. If you wanted to change this, you can go over to the Styles tab, and here you see now, okay, title and subtitle. How should we align this? We want to center align this, or do we want to left align this? I think center align actually looks nice because we have center align things here as well. So this is quite nice. And we also see we have other options as well, right? So for example, if you wanted to make changes to other parts of this block, here's where you would do that. For example, if you're a big fan of rounded borders, well, let's go to the cover media tag, right? And let's make sure we set it from rounded to slightly rounded to quite rounded, right? This is the most rounded option where we have real bubbles. And then if we wanted to also align the overall field here, we could do that as well by going into the card elements and say, well, this also should be really rounded. And now we have an overall, right, just like nice little touch for our aesthetics. Next, we need to work on functionality, because so far we're just showing all 4 elements, right? We're not restricting it to the 2 elements or the 1 element that a specific user has access to. In order to do that, we need to add exactly that. We need to add users to our app. Luckily, there's another thing that Softr handles for us. We can have our users in Notion, but Softr will manage, passwords, these all sort of things. So in order to do so, let's click on users here. And then we can start adding, syncing this with the data source as well, right? So either we can manage them directly here, but we want to have them in Notion, right? This is where we have our database with our Cafe Notion partner. So why not use that? So let's go in, say sync with data source. I'm going to select the data source, right? Will be my Notion account. And now I can use, select my Cafe Notion partners here as a dropdown. Now, very important, I can then say, okay, which records should be added to? I say, well, everyone who's near should have access to the app, but I could also say, well, only specific ones. I could, for example, say only if you have a status in there, right, and want to exclude people who are no longer a partner, we could do that. In this case, since I will only have people who are active clients there, I can use everyone. But just know, right, this is how a good way of how you can then limit and dynamically say, okay, only if they are currently subscribed to our services should they have access to the app. So let's go ahead and say, okay, we want to map our email, right, to the email address in Notion. And if we want to match other fields, we could also map the name to name. That's good. If they have a user profile, right, we could also map that, but we don't really need that. So mapping the name and mapping the email address, that's all I want for now. We could also add created time, but again, this is something we're going to skip. Now I'm going to move myself over here, and then I will say save and sync. And then in a moment, we will see that our Notion people show up as users in Softr, and the other way around, right? If we create anyone in here, that will also happen in a second, right? This bubble goes through and shows that it's successful. We'll be able to start using it. There it is. Now we have hello at Matthias Frank, right? Our ex-Starbucks lover who has an email address in there synced over. You'll notice that my coffee purist is not being synced over because they don't have an email address. Only if you put in an email address, right, can we create that person as user. So I'm just going to put the same email address in for that person. And then in a moment, we'll also start seeing that one in reflected in Softr and in Notion at the same time. Now, how do users log into our app? Well, we can decide that under authentication right here. So we can say, how does it work? Should they use the email, right? Do we want to use a specific other method, right? There are various ways. And the one that I prefer actually in these cases is magic link. Magic links are super useful in these situations, particularly when you're, fine with just making sure that they have the easiest possible way to access these things. Sure, password, email plus password is sometimes a little bit more secure, but at the end of the day, in most of these applications, right, you just want to share resources with someone. You're not building like a super crazy high security element, and magic links are just so convenient. You also don't need to deal with people having to reset the passwords in the app, right? So I really like this. So I need to type now, I understand the risk, but I really like this. I'm going to enable it. And then in a moment, we can start syncing these elements from Notion also back to, from Softr to Notion, so we can easily share it with our users. Then once we've done that, let's actually turn off the email sign-on, right? We just want to keep them with the magic link. That makes it much easier. And then we're going to say remove email, no, only magic link, confirm, perfect. And now this is our default sync option. Back on the user tab, we are getting now this warning, right? That one user is not currently synced. This is the one that we added the email for, right? So I can just click in here. We can trigger the sync. That way it will pull that user in a moment. And then we can make sure that we start testing our magic link. Now in order to do so, we actually need to publish our app first. So let's click on publish in the top right corner. Say publish, right? We can use the standard domain. That is fine. And then if we now take our magic link, we should be able to log in an incognito browser window. And here we go. Welcome coffee. This is your homepage, right? Browse your resources. Takes a second for it to load. But we see now that it actually works. And we have this, for the coffee purist, this basic working setup ready. Pretty cool that you can spin up a front end for your Notion app in, just a few minutes. And now that we have the user authentication ready, we can also make sure that we only show resources that we want to show to that specific user rather than just all resources by default. So how do we tackle this? Let's click on our list item. And that opens up our settings again. And then now here on the side where we say source, we can, once it has loaded, set conditional filters. So you see currently we're showing list items that match all foreign conditions and we don't have any conditions set. Now just the same way that directly in Notion with our databases, we can set certain views to show only certain items. We can do exactly the same here for the database that we render from Notion in Softr. But with the one difference that whereas in Notion, these filters are more like soft suggestions, right? And if someone has access to the underlying database, they can always circumvent it and access all information if they want to. Here, that's not possible, right? This filter actually stays sort of true. So we say, if show only these items if, and of course you could set any number of other conditions, right? Maybe you have some resources that are not published yet, so you have a status on them that says, well, draft, and then you want to just exclude them for everyone. In this case, right, everything that we have there we want to show, but we want to only show the ones where we have our can accessed by. That's the property, right? Remember that we've set in Notion. Includes any select value, or we want to set the logged in user only if the logged in user's name, right? Only if that one matches the entry in there, only then do we want to show them. So let's set that, and then let's see how that changes now when we watch it in our live demo. Before I can do that though, we need to of course publish our change, right? So let's click on publish in the top right corner, publish updates, and now we can head back over to our the part where we log in, right? We're just going to refresh this page, and if everything worked, we should now see a lot less resources because Coffee Purist, yes, remember, he has only access to this coffee recipes and links of ours. And we can double check in Notion, right, that this is correct. Coffee Purist currently can access Notion recipes and drinks, perfect. And if we want to give them access to anything else, right, let's give them also access to our Notion basics. Let's be a bit generous here. We can head back over to it, right, refresh it again. And then in a moment, we should see actually 2 entries here. Yes, perfect. So that means we've basically created the very basic framework for our app with Notion. We have in Notion our databases that power all the backend and information. We're using Softr to build a very simple front end for them and to display only relevant entries to them. Now, all that's left is take the same thing that we would otherwise build in Notion, right? And we can click into an item, then we see related entries, we see some other information, and so on and so on, right? Just take our system that we would usually build in Notion and build it in Softr so that we have the full functionality ready. The next logical thing, right, would be exactly this functionality. Currently, we can't click into them, right? You see that nothing is linked here. We can't see more information. Most importantly, we can't see the actual lessons that belong to a topic. So let's set that up next. Back in Softr, let's click on our grid here, and let's make sure that we go over to the Actions tab. And now under Actions, we can say what should happen if we click on an item. Right? We can also do some other elements. We can add some buttons there. This is very useful if you build more of an interactive application, right? Again, check out my client portal video where we can use these buttons, for example, to allow people to add a new request. In this case, since they're only going to read these resources, we don't need to do that. So for now, we're just going to say, well, when they click on the item, we want to open a details page. The details page in Softr is the equivalent, right, to the page that opens up in Notion if I click on something. Here in Notion, right, by default, you know that, of course, every entry in a database is its own page. So I can click on Notion Basics, right, and then shows me something here. And if I were to build a setup in Notion, I would create now a template here that shows me all related resources in the page body. So here we do this by saying open details page. Now, we don't have a details page set up yet. So if we click here in the selection, it tells us, well, they are currently for topics, no details pages, but we can simply create one by clicking here. Then it will change our look, right? We're now at the details page. And one thing that you notice, like our pages popped up just here on the side. And this is actually where it will organize all the pages for your web app. And it starts automatically to set up a bunch of pages for you, right? So remember, whole, that is actually where we've worked so far. And then we have a lot of utility pages, right? Login account settings. We can remove a lot of them because we won't use our normal logins. We will only use our magic links. Some of the other ones might list details. They might also not be needed, but we'll walk through that and tidy it up in a moment. Let's for now go back to topic details and focus on setting this one up. So by default, this is what we get. Actually, let's also remove this, right? So we just want to start with a blank page. We can click now here to add our first block. And just like before, right, we can now go through the different options that we have here. And the one that we need in order to pull in information from that entry in Notion, right, dynamic data, that will be our item details. And you see we have a bunch of different options, right? We can do one with an image, we can do one with a video. So this will be useful later for the individual lessons because there we might want to embed the video. But here, let's go just with the list details. So let's add that one back in. So then we can click onto it and we can again say, well, where should it pull that from? Well, these list details will be pulled from our topics database, right? That's what we actually want to populate here. And then we can head over to content again and start mapping information, right? Cover media, right? Let's leave that, right? We might map all of this later. For the heading, we want to make sure that this is mapped to the name of our entry. For the rich text, we want to map this to the description. And then for the tags, remember we had this to the display number of resources that we previously had set up. Now, as you can see, there are now a lot of additional fields. You can actually add more fields to this top area. And then we have these sections, right? So if we had now a database in Notion that would contain a lot of information, right? So if our topics had a bunch of additional properties and we want to show them, okay, these are the different elements here, or we could pull all of them in there. For example, actually, maybe we want to display the total duration here, right? So similar to how we did it for our display resource, we could simply duplicate this property, right? And let's call this display not resources on Softr, but display duration on Softr, and the property, and let's say instead of number of resources, duration for lessons, and then take here our total duration. Perfect. And then we can add that in probably minutes after that, just realizing this plus min. Perfect. And now we can go back in here, right, and say we want to add one more field. Please also display as this sort of like tag-like look, right, like with this little label. I would like to have the duration Oh, and just realizing we of course need to refresh again, right? Because we made changes in Notion. So let's go back here to our source tab, click on refresh once, and then under content tag, we should now be able to match yes here, display duration on Softr. And now we see in a second, once this has reloaded, that we have now there both our number of resources and the duration displayed. Perfect. So now let's click into this and remove the other properties, right? Because we don't need them. Again, if you have a database with a lot more content, we could use them. But in our case, we don't care about that. We want to go on this and we want to just remove this whole section altogether. Nice. Now, what we can do is we can actually also not just leave it at this, right? This is just a core information, but now we want to show them more, okay, what lessons actually belong to this lecture. So in order to do this, let's click on the plus button, right? We want to add another block. In this case, it will be, again, a list, right? Remember, whenever we want to display information from a database, like several entries, we're going to add lists. So let's add our main list block here. And this time, tell it, well, the database that we want to show this time is training materials. And we see it suggests us information because it knows that these databases are both linked with our topics database that we are displaying here. All right, so now we have our training materials in here. And just like before, we want to set a conditional filter, because we don't want to display all topics, but only the ones that belong to this specific, so not all training materials, only the ones that belong to the specific topic. And Softr actually, assumes that this is our intention. So it presets this filter and says, well, only show this if the topic includes the actual name here. You know the drill by now. It's time to map our content. So let's go over to the content tab, make sure our heading is mapped to the name of the lesson. Tags can be this time mapped to actual tags, right? Because we have tags in our database. So let's go in here, say this will be tags. The text can be our description in the property. And then the question is, do we want to add any additional fields, right? Let's inspect our database in Notion. One thing that might be nice to also show on this main list item, right, is the lesson number. So let's add another field and say this will be the lesson. Oops, do we have it? No, where is it? Sorry, our field will be the type rich text, right? And we map it to our lesson number. And now we have all the information here at the top. And then you see that Softr also gives us a lot more space, and we have this expanding area down here. We have these bunch of text fields, and we have different options. We can, right now it is set to only show right when we click on this item. We can also make this, show all the time if we had a database in Notion that had a ton of information. But since this is just a lesson, right, we don't really need to display any other meta information from here. We can just say, well, let's hide this second section altogether to just make it a lot cleaner. Now, the one thing that is still missing here is making sure that it sorts in the right order. So what I want to do is I want to look through here, right? We don't have filters for it, but down below we should be seeing an option to sort this in the right order. Actually, sorry, I think it is under source list settings. Yeah, there we go. Under source list settings, we can now say that we want to sort this by a specific property. So we want to sort it by the lesson number and like in ascending order, right? So the 101, 102, yes, orders earlier. Perfect. We could also set items per page. I don't think this is currently necessary because once the filter is correctly applied, it never shows in the preview here, but once the filter is correctly applied on our actual app, we won't have a lot of lessons at once. So this is pretty good. So let's save this, publish it, and see how it looks on when a user logs in. So here I am back logged in as Coffee Purist in the little app. I'm going to refresh it to then see how it looks now. If I click into any entry, there we go. And now we should be able to hover over things. And yeah, now we see we have a little hover information animation informing us that we can click into this. And now if we click into our Cafe Notion recipes and drinks, we should get our entry here, our signature recipes and drinks. Perfect, 5 lessons. And here are the lessons, and only the ones of 201, right? Only the ones that belong to this specific element. Perfect. Now, this, of course, still needs some styling. We have like these random buttons floating around, right? And we won't have any user actions here. So we need to remove these buttons. We need to remove search and filters and this add record option. So let's just do this right now. Here on our main entry, right? If we go on source and then probably where does it look? Our search entries, is it under, I think probably under actions. So let's see. So we have our top bar option, right? Add record. We don't want that. So we're going to delete that. Now we need to find where our search is. I thought it was under source, but I don't see it right now. Let's see. No, so maybe it is under content. Let's see. Here's the search bar. So we can toggle off our search bar. And now only left are the filters. We're going to delete them again. And now we are just left with our clean look for this part. And then we can go up here, right? And we can make sure that here we also remove that button that will be under actions. Remove that. Perfect. Much cleaner look. Now, if we wanted to, right, which might make sense, we can add back in a little heading element for this one. So backend content where we can say, well, title and subtitling. Let's see, all the resources you need. Please click into any item to watch the lesson, something like that. But we're currently doing a mix between a franchise and an online course, and we want to make sure on the style, right, that we move this all to the middle again, like in the other one, right, title and subtitle. We're going to align that in the center, and now, right, we have the same style of the look as on the main card. Now we need to repeat the same process now for our individual lessons, right? Because again, someone should be able to click into them and then actually see what materials we have in store for them. So let's do that. Let's make sure that we say override actions, right? On click of any list item here, what we want to make sure is we want to open another details page, and we don't have a details page for training materials yet. So let's create it. Clicking here, again, we get our new page right here on the side. Perfect. And now we can start setting that up. Same way, this time we're going to focus right on displaying probably the lesson and just allowing people to download any additional resources if we have attached them to it. Let's start by deleting this default list details because we don't want that. Instead, what we want in this case are the details with a video. So let's add that in here. And then it's time to first select our database from which we will be pulling the information, or training materials, and the content, again, mapping time. So heading, that will be in Notion our name property. The text property will be our description. The video will be our video URL. In this case, we don't have proper video URL, so our preview won't work, but we'll fix it in a second. And then tags can be the tags from Notion, right? Because in this case, we actually have tags here in our database. Perfect. Now, this text down below here, right, the rich text element, we don't need that. We don't have any properties matching for that. So we can just hide this. And now we're pretty much done, right? The only other thing that we need to do now is we need to somehow give them an option to download or additional files that we have stored in Google Drive or elsewhere. Now we could just, of course, use the rich text, right, or just a standard URL field for that, but let's actually try using our actions for the first time. Here we see under the actions tab, right, we have already this edit button, and we can use that, or we can actually delete it and set up from scratch. So let's delete it and then add a new item button. This one, in terms of the action, right, will be open URL. We have an external URL that we have saved somewhere, so this is the action. Instead of open, we want to call this, download resources. And then in terms of the URL field, this will be in our Notion database, the where is it, additional files option. And we can say same tab or other tab, right? I usually want this to open a new tab. This is just nice on the user experience because they don't lose access to the actual video. Let's test this again, right? I clicked on publish to add this app, and I also in Notion, I made sure I replaced all our wrong links with a YouTube video link. And then we can go down here, right, refresh this whole thing once, and then we should be able to click into our individual lessons, see the details, watch the video, and download any resources. All right, here we go. Perfect. We have our video, right? The video can play right here in Softr, so that works like a charm. We have our beverages and core skills, the text here, and we have this button to download any additional resource. Again, this will be a wrong link, it doesn't do anything, but we get the gist. One thing we notice while looking at this is that we are missing navigation, right? We have no way to get back to our main page. Whereas our main page, right, if we go back to when using the magic link to the main entry of this, we see that we have this very nice app-like element here on the side that we can also further customize. So let's make sure that we have this actually on every single page, and then let's set this also up to look a bit nicer. So let's go back to Softr, and we'll find these settings if you go to pages, and then, sorry, not pages, but at the very top, this page settings button. Here you see on the down, we have navigation. And we can say currently this has none. But what we want is we want navigation 1. This is our default navigation, the one with the sidebar. And that's all actually we need to set up there for the moment, where we can just click on publish updates, and then look back at our main entry, right? Let's click back through Cafe Notion, recipe and drinks, and then into the signature drink preparation. Perfect. And now you see we have our little app navigation here on the side. The place where we still need to add it is to the other details page. So let's go to pages and then topics details, right? That was that one. And here, again, page settings, turn on navigation 1. We can edit this navigation 1 in a moment, but now it already will look much nicer than before. While we're at it, let's also quickly just rearrange our sidebar a little bit. So under pages, let's make sure home, right, that's the main page that I always want to have at the very top. Then we'll have topics, then we have training materials. And we don't need any of the other pages, so I'm going to delete lists. I'm going to delete list details, and I'm going to delete the form. But of course, if you wanted people, to allow people to, request new resources, you could do it through that. Actually, adding a form with some support tickets might be a good idea. So let's do this right now. Let's go back to Notion quickly. Let's add a new database and say database. This will be, support tickets, and we can make sure that we, what do we have here? We have a description. Oops, sorry, a text property, which will be the, the request details. We need like a timestamp, right? Sort of like the created time. And then we probably want to also like who created it. Now for who created, we have two options. We can do this as a normal name field, or we could link actually our support requests to the specific users, which might be the nicer way to do it. So let's add a relation. Let's add this relation to our Cafe Notion partners, two-way, right? Support tickets. Perfect. Very simple setup. And now let's head back to Softr and let's create this page, right? So we haven't talked about creating a page just like this. So you can always pages and then click on plus. And here we can call this now, support ticket, or like get help. Let's call this get help. Perfect. Let's click on save. And then we have our new page. On this page, let's look for the form block, right? So here we have a nice new conditional form. We can add this in. We have a lot of things that we can set here. And one of the most important things, of course, we want to make sure that we map this to our Notion database so the information goes where it should be. So data source, let's send this to our, what was it? I think we called it tickets, right? Support tickets database. Perfect. In terms of the form layout, we can figure out whether we want to have this centered, right? Whether we want an image on the side, some big text. I think the image one, I like quite like this, right? To have some option to add like some asset here. And then for the button, submit sounds good. We don't really need an icon. Let's start working through form details. So go to questions. And then here we can now say, okay, what should we have for our different steps? So we want to have for the first step, right? We want to say, this can be the heading, get help for your Cafe Notion. And then the text will be whatever it is you need, we're here to help! Exclamation. Perfect. And then the question is, what fields, right, do we want to collect? And do we want to collect the full name? Is there anything else that we want? No, I think full name, we can delete that because we know already like who that person is. So we don't need that. And for the section 2, we currently ask for the city. Well, that's actually also something that we probably don't need. So we can see whether we remove that as well. I think we can remove the whole second section, right? We don't need that. We only want our first section. Now, what do we want to ask? We want to ask maybe for like some single line text. And we will map this to the name of our entry, and we'll call this what is this about? Short description. And then we will add another field with like a long text or maybe even some rich text formatting, right? So they can do that. So these will be the request details. This elaborate. Here's where you can write some text. Perfect. And that's pretty much it for these elements right now. If they submit it, we can then send them some information, right? Or we can like trigger that, use Notion database automations to notify us if something happens. So lots of cool options there. One really cool thing also in Softr, right, which is not yet there in Notion as conditional logic. So we could say, okay, depending on what they answer, right, in things, maybe you have some drop-down steps, maybe they actually can select different topics for their forms where they can say, okay, we're like this is a request for we want to open a new cafe, right? And maybe then they get some different questions asked rather than if we say, well, we need some help troubleshooting our espresso machine. So really, really cool things that you can do here if you want to play around with some more advanced formula form logic. One last thing we need to do there in order to track actually who submitted it, right? We need to add one hidden field. So I can scroll down to hidden, and here this will be mapped to our Cafe Notion partners, and the value will be the logged in user name, right? And this will make sure that when they submit it, it will automatically be related to our entry Notion. So our Notion backend for this little app stays up to date at all times. Now let's make sure our users can actually access this form, our new page. For that, let's click on our navigation. Anywhere, right, on any page where we see our navigation already, we can click on it. We see, okay, here we have our settings. Let's rename this actually from navigation 1 to main navigation. I don't think we'll have several here, but still nicer than navigation 1. Layout on the side, that's perfect. We don't need a logo for now, but we now want to make sure that our links fit, right? Home is correctly linked to home, so that works. But projects doesn't exist anymore, so we can actually delete it for now. and then form, let's click on this and change the icon to something like, like, is there like a question? Perfect, yes. Let's call this, get help. And as a page that we want to open, this will be our get help page. Perfect, so now it's mapped. We can open this in the same tab, right? This is the expected behavior inside, would be expected behavior in an app. We can also add a subtitle, right? For all your Cafe Notion questions. All right, perfect. And then we can publish the whole thing and then look at it on the front end again to see whether it now looks like we want it to. So back logged in, let's go to our Get Help page with our new navigation. Let's make sure Get Help, Cafe Notion, amazing. Yes, short description, pretty coffee, please. And let's say, I would help with latte art. Can you publish some more tutorials? Question mark. Let's submit. And we haven't changed the submit state yet, right? So if we submit this, all we'll get is like this little notification here and it just reloads the form. You could change that, right? In our settings here for our form, we have this option on the questions. At the bottom right, it says endings. Here we could change this, right? Instead of refreshing the form, we could open a different page, right? We could tell them all, thank you for getting in touch, yada, 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 whatever it is. But for now, let's leave it like this. Let's check though in Notion. We have our support ticket, pretty coffee please, request details, amazing, the create time, and it has been linked to our user, right? So we can, with that in our Notion system, then track who requested what. So we can tie in the front end now from our Notion app, right? In Softr, where they enter these things, it comes back into our Notion system. And if we then use Notion internally with our team, right, to run the whole business, right? We have a proper business operating setup. If you need one, by the way, link for that in the description. All these things flow together here with the information, and your team can work there while you can be sure that you can, share all the relevant details with also external partners. Now we are nearly ready to put some finishing touches on our app. But before we do that, I just want to show you one other example, right, of how you can tie in your Notion system with this front end. Let's say, for example, we have some snapshot details in Notion, right? So maybe we use some other automations, or someone puts this together manually to get some key data on some information, and we want to regularly share this with our franchise holders. So one way, again, right, we can do this. We can go on Notion on our own page, and maybe we want to display this at the very top. So let's go here and say, let's add a block to this, and let's look for snapshot. What I would recommend is you just go, you see there are a ton of cards that you can add to this, right? So many different things. What I want to do now here is the summary cards. I'm going to add this here, which gives me this quick snapshot, and then the database that we're going to use for this is the snapshot details. And here, again, right, you could do conditional filters if you want to also only share certain snapshot data with certain franchisees. Maybe there's, like different access levels, and you want to make sure, not everyone gets to see your revenue data. All fine. Same idea as previously. In this case, let's show it all. And then under features, let's make sure for the feature card, right, we also map now information. So for the name, we will map the title, and for the value, we will map the data. And then in a second, while you see it updating, so we have training resource available, 200 plus modules. Well, that's not correct, right? I think we have like 15, but still, you get the gist. We have all these things here. And then now, like quick overview, that's the state of Cafe Notion. Always stay up to date on the situation in our business family, exclamation mark. Perfect. Now we have that all in there. And now let's tidy up the rest of our pages, but you get the idea, right? And there's one additional one, so I don't like that. So let's just delete one of these elements. Let's delete this one. Then we have a nicer look here. The second this will reload. Now let's talk styles and design. Where you want to have basically to set up this, front end styles for your Softr plus Notion app is the theme section. And that's another benefit, right, of using this double stack of Notion in the backend, where you internally work, and then this other section where people and the external ones can access it, because Softr gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to style, right? In Notion, very famous, we have very rigid styles. Ivan famously, right, wants to avoid that anyone can build something ugly in Notion. I still think you can do ugly things in Notion, but it means, right, there are certain styles that you just can't change. But here we have a lot more flexibility, so you can really align it with your sort of brand vision. So let's go just through a few things. I think for our fonts, I really like this combination of sign for my headings, and then I think it's something Jakarta, yes, plus Jakarta Suns as my font for the body, right? Just to give it a little different look than the usual Inter combination. Now, for the colors, I asked AI to help me come up with a color scheme, because that's not where my strong suit lies. But let's see what it suggested and whether we like the vibe of it. For accent color, we definitely want to get away from this very ugly blue. So let's replace this with this much warmer terracotta. For our main text, we want to stay dark, but we want to move away from just like a very strong black. So in this case, I will use this one, which again, like in the preview, looks very similar, but AI suggested it, so let's go with that. And then last but not least, our background white is nice, but maybe some green would look nice, in particular in this coffee shop setting. So for the background, let's go in here and let's use this one, and then let's save the whole thing and check out how this looks now. Before we can see the full effect, we need to go into our individual blocks as well though, because Softr is currently revamping the way the color styles work. So some of the older blocks, right, they still have like the separately set colors, so there we need to just go in once and update it. So let's click on the block, let's go on styles, and let's change the background color right from white to our general terracotta that we have everywhere. Same here, right, styles, background will be this, and then very down at the bottom, the new block, right, this new list block, you see, it gets that automatically, so that we don't need to do that. Perfect. So then let's click on publish and then head to our front end and refresh it once and see how it looks, right? If we hit refresh once, we should see our new color scheme, amazing together with our different fonts, right? Looks much nicer, much more polished than before. We probably want to change something on the white background of the tiles here. We can do it in a moment. Let's inspect the get help page, causing to update that image that doesn't really fit anymore, but you see our font really nice, a little bit artsy. I think a very nice vibe for our Cafe Notion franchise system. Now, everything I've shown you so far can be built on the free plan of Softr. But in case you upgrade to the paid ones, there are two more really cool things that I want to show you that are possible. The first has something to do with the design and the look, and the second is a functionality aspect. Since we're currently designing this, let's stay with that for a moment. What you can do as soon as you upgrade to the first paid plan is that you can add your own custom code. So for example, right, if we inspect this element here, right, with our different cards, one thing that we see, if we click currently on the styles, is then we notice that we don't have many styling options here, right? We don't, for example, have an option to add a border radius like here. So what do? Well, we can add our own custom code if we go to settings and then here custom code. And this allows us to insert any type of CSS or other code rules to really style this any way we want. Now, even if you've never written any custom code before, don't worry, because with the help of AI, this shouldn't be too tricky. Basically, you need to do a two-step process. Step one is figuring out what element do we actually want to modify, and step two is then asking AI for that modification. So how do we figure out what to modify? Well, we see here, right, we have these individual cards. Now, what we can do is we can go into our preview, right? This is the browser now with our preview coffee purist. That's who I'm logged in as. And now I will right-click the page and click on inspect. And this pulls up this scary-looking side panel where basically I can now hover over every HTML element on this page, right, and learn a little bit more about it. Usually the best way to go is to go on this like arrow option and then go over it until it highlights the whole element that we're looking at, right? So here we have this about block, and here we have like this the headings inside the blocks, but there's also this one option, right, which tells us, okay, this is the whole card. So if we click on this, we see on the side that we can also hover above and below, right, to see different elements. Looks like we found these list items, and they have one element, which is called a class name, right? So you see there's div class, and then summary list item, movie box root, and so on, and then have these other elements. But what we care about is basically one of these classes. Now again, right, if you're a bit unsure how to identify a class, an easy way is to just simply take this whole thing, take a screenshot, ask AI, like how can I identify it? But since I know a little bit about CSS, I know that, okay, if I have this class summary list item, right, that should be something that I should be able to target with my custom code. So now I can go back to Softr. I can click on settings, custom code, and I've already asked AI actually to write this for me. So I know that what I need to do is I need to put everything into this like style brackets, and then I can now use summary list item, the element that I just found, and give it this border radius 8 pixel. And then I also need to give it this like exclamation mark important, which is not the best practice when it comes to web development because it sort of overrides all other styles. But since it's like a little bit tricky to target elements here that have already styling on them, we want to do that. So then I can click on save, and I can click on publish, and now we can head over to the front end of our web app and refresh this whole thing. And now we should be able to see this with the correct border styling. And you see already in the preview, right, we have now these little nice rounded corners since we're telling our app, all these cards should have rounded corners. Amazing. And this is the approach that you can use, right, to customize anything here where you say, okay, this is, not bad, but I don't exactly like how it looks. For example, the next thing we could try to do is change the background color, right? So let's go back and say, well, we have already our selector here, right? Let's go back to custom code. Let's go in here and say, well, after the after the border radius, what I would like to set the background color to, let's do red for a moment, right? We would not stay probably with red, but just as an experiment, see whether that works. Click on publish updates, and then head back over to our live preview and see whether now all of them have a probably very ugly, yes, red background. Perfect. So, not really perfect, right? But now what we can do is we can go back to our AI and figure out, okay, what would be a nice color that works very well with our, beige-ish background, right? If I remember correctly, if we go to our theme settings, we had this like accent color. So let's use this rather than this horrible red. And just like so, replace red with this hex code. Click on save again, and then on publish, and then see whether that looks nicer than our white version, or whether we need to get our AI stylist again to give us some nicer looks. Okay, the brown, already better for sure than the other thing, but now it's not really readable. So I'll just ask AI for like a light shade, and then we should be good to go. All right, I think our AI designer might have done a little bit of a better job than me with first the red and then the terracotta. So this is still like a whitish tone, right? But it's a bit warmer than this like stark white that we previously had. So I quite like this. So let's go with this and wrap up this styling session for now. All right, I also quickly added some new images here, right? So the default ones. To do so, very simple. In Notion, in our system, on our, we're in our topics, we're going to create a new property, right, for files and media. And then in Softr, we can simply go in and just like before with our content, right, make sure that we map the files and media property to our files and media property in Notion. Perfect. So let's talk now the additional functionality. How cool would it be if we could actually track like how people progress, right? So if they are done with the lesson, we want to tell them, well, this is, your progress, you've completed X out of Y elements here. Well, in order to do so, we need to add a little bit of extra tricks to our Notion backend first. So in Notion, let's go to our individual lessons. And let's make sure that from the individual lessons, the training materials, we also want to create a relation to the people that we have, right? So I want to say, well, let's add a relation to our Cafe Notion partners. And let's call this completed by, and let's call this here our completed lessons. Perfect. Now, what we can do next, we can go back to Softr, and in Softr, we can look for our details page for the individual lessons. And remember, we find that if we click under pages and then training materials details, that pulls up this page again. Here also, by the way, would be like a good use case now for our custom CSS, right? Making sure that our image file has some nice rounded corners, that's like has a certain size, right? All of this we can do with our custom CSS, just the same as we did previously on the main page. In terms of functionality, what we want to do now is when I click on this entry, right, we go over to the Actions tab, and here we will add now a button. The action on the button will be to do a one-click update. We can call this complete lesson, and we can tell us, well, okay, if someone clicks this button, what we want to do is we want to modify the completed by field. Now, there's a problem which makes our backend setup in Notion for this app a little bit more complicated. Because currently, Softr only allows us to replace existing values, right? So we can't just add users to it. Well, that means, right, if someone else clicks the completed lesson, they would overwrite who completed it, which is of course not ideal. So we'll have to do some more magic in a moment. But for now, let's just do this. Let's say replace existing value with logged in user record ID. And then we can publish this, and we can publish the updates. And now, if a user, right, in our front end, coffee purist, right, if they click here on the completed lesson button, what will happen is they will fill out the details here, and we will see that this person has now completed this specific lesson. So far, so good. Now, to make sure that we can actually track over time who watched everything or like completed different lessons and not just override every single time a new user says completed lesson, we need to expand our backend. In order to do so, let's go to the bottom and let's create a new database. And this database will be a so-called join table. Basically, what it will record is whenever someone watches a lesson. Let me show you what it means. Let's call this completed lessons log. And what we'll do here is we'll create a relation from our completed log to our to the Cafe Notion partners. There will be a two-way relation, and we will also create a relation to our training materials. Perfect. And also two-way relation. Now, what we'll do is we go back to our training materials and we say, okay, I need a Notion database automation. Basically, whenever completed by is filled out, create a new record. So let's say set completion record. And our trigger will be that we have a specific property edited, right? Our, what was it? Completed by. Whenever this is edited, what I want you to do is I want you to create a new page. I want you to add a page to our log as it. Here's our completed lessons log. And what I want you to do is I want you to add two properties, the Copy Notion and the training materials. And luckily we have now a Notion formula access, right? So we can say, okay, for the Copy Notion partner, not copy purist, what I would like you to do is create a custom formula and say, okay, the trigger page, right, where we just had the completed by edited, get from that person, the completed by value. And then for the training materials, again, custom formula, or in this case, we can go directly, right, the trigger page. And then in terms of the name, if we wanted to, right, we could just do like a joint here. We could say trigger page dot completed by plus completed plus trigger page. Now, looks a little bit complicated, but let's walk through this step by step. What happens when someone now clicks the button? Well, if someone clicks the button in Softr and fills out that they have completed this lesson, what Notion will do is it will go in and it will create a new log entry, and it will connect this log entry to the user who clicked the button and to the lesson on which she clicked that button. And that is then a permanent record, right? So even if the next time someone overwrites this here, no problem, we still store in our completed lesson log everything that happens. All right, let's test this. I've cleaned out the data, so let's go back to our front end, right, and say, okay, I have completed this lesson as Coffee Purist. Now in a second, he pops up in here, and that means we trigger our Notion automation, which will hopefully create our completed lessons log. Perfect, that worked. So now we see we have an entry here in our completed lessons log where it says completed Coffee Purist, completed signature drink preparation, and we have the links to our partner and the training materials. And even if now the next person, clicks this button, it will still work because we can still see, okay, he completed this, right? Everything works just fine. We have like this running log, even if this other property here, this completed by property, gets overwritten every single time. Which means we can now start counting lessons, right? So let's go back to our Copy Notion partner and make sure we actually calculate how many lessons they have access to and how many they have completed. So in order to do that, let's create here a new formula property, and let's call this available lessons. And for available lessons, what we want to do is we want to go to the has access property, right? This shows us the topics. And then from the has access to, what we can do is we can simply, since we count on there the number of entries, right, we can say total display resources. Now, what is it? Number of resources, this property, that's what I would like to have. And I would like to sum it across the board. So let's click on save. And then we see, okay, these are the number of available lessons. And then in order to count how many someone has completed, right, we can simply do another formula. And we can say completed lessons number. And again, right, just going quickly here, we of course would style our backend in Notion a bit prettier. But just for this example, I think this is good enough. We can again now go to our completed lessons log and say, okay, from the completed lessons log, please simply give me the length, right, the number of entries that we have in here, which gives us our current progress, right? 8 lessons are available, we completed 1. Back in Softr, let's visualize this. So let's add a new block here at the top. And there's an option to use the container block, right? Containers allow us to lay out our page with more elements side by side. So I want 2 columns in this case. And now I can click in the left column and say, okay, in this left column, what I would like to do, let's click on plus. I would like to use a specific chart. And the one that I'm going to use here is the metric, because I want to compare 2 metrics and I want to show like how many they've completed versus how many are still open. But of course, you could just also like prepare your data in the Notion backend in a different way to then visualize it with charts, right? The chart visualization works very similar to the way Notion charts work. So if you're familiar with how to build them, you will have no problem building, also like rendering them right in the Softr frontend. If you need a refresher, I have a link for that in the description. So let's add our metric here to the left, and this user metric, right? We will use the Copy Notion partner element. And what I would like to do here is I would like to show only list items that match the condition of our current user, right? So the currently logged in name should match the logged in user's name. Perfect. And then what we will do is under the content, in terms of metric, right? Like we call this completed lessons. And what I would like to show here is the completed lessons number. We could, of course, do some, right, but we only show one, so that is perfectly fine. And then what we will do is we will do the exact same thing on the other side. Well, we'll do again, okay, let's add a chart, let's add our metric. Let's pick again Cafe Notion partners. Let's again make sure we filter this down to only show the metrics of our one user, right? Name includes any of logged in users' name. Perfect. In here, the content will be available lessons, and our value will be available lessons. Perfect. Now we can publish this, right? And now the user, when he logs in, you will see at the very top, okay, one completed lesson, 23 in total. And as you know, as I click through elements, right, and I check them off, this will keep going. Well, the number will keep going up, and I see my progress here at the top. All right, now let's make our app production ready. There are a few last steps that we need to do for this. The first thing is locking down our app. Our main homepage is already locked down, and we see this with this little lock icon, right? Only logged in users can see. But the new pages that we've added, get help, topic details, and training materials, they don't have that yet. So let's quickly go to them, make sure that in settings for all these pages, we set the visibility not to all users, but only to logged in users. And then we can just click on save and do this for all the other pages as well. So settings, go to visibility, make sure from all users to only logged in users. So no one who's not logged in can access anything here, right? Visibility, all users, also logged in users. Save. Perfect. Then let's go to our settings and just make sure that we have everything set up as you want. Under general, we can change now our subdomain. So rather than using, this default one, we could switch this to Cafe Notion if it was still available on the Softr app. I think it should be, or we can also switch it to our own custom subdomain. We can then also swap out the icon and logo, right? So if we don't like this logo, right, let's pick some more library. So let's pick they have a coffee or like a mug maybe. No, so let's see what we can use instead, right? Maybe we just use like a smiley happy face. We don't have a logo really, right? But we could upload our own favicon, the little thing that pops up in the browser to indicate that this is the page. And since you're now on a pro plan, right, we can also remove the Softr branding, so we don't have that badge floating there. Next, if we have our custom domain, right, then under custom domain, this is where we would connect it. But for this purpose, let's skip that for now. Under SEO, we can now set our title, right, and our UI. So anything, right, that we want to make sure for example, for Google search, where we need to make sure that it shows up in Google Analytics. All these things we can set up here. And then last but not least, if we wanted to, right, under advanced settings, we could set whether we allow caching, right, which just increases our performance a little bit because we don't load the app every single time completely from scratch. And with that, we're pretty much good to go. You can click on publish one last time, and then you can head on back over to Notion, right? Make sure you have all your different clients in the Notion database. You can update your Notion information as you want, right? It will automatically populate in your new app. And yeah, you just built your first app for Notion. Pretty cool, right? Let me know down below in the comments which app you would like to see me build next, what apps you are building, and if you have any share links, right, of things that I can inspect, also drop them below. I would love to see what you're building. One of my favorite things, for example, to build with a combination of Notion plus Softr right now are client portals, because it's the only way, again, right, to securely share certain projects and tasks with a specific client. And you can use this tutorial, right, or you can go to the link in the description where I have a specific dedicated one for this use case where we talk about tasks, projects, and all the setup in your Notion backend, plus then the Softr frontend. So go there, check it out, and then I'll see you in a second.